Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a really fascinating corner of the law, something that pops up way more often than you'd think. We're talking about quasi-contracts.
So let's just jump right in with a question. Picture this. You're at home, a pizza deliverance shows up at your door. You didn't order it, but hey, it's your favorite topping, so you eat it. The big question is, do you have to pay for it? It's exactly this kind of tricky situation where the idea of a quasi-contract comes into play.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start by figuring out what this contract that isn't actually is. Then we'll explore all its different flavors, things like duties of aid, unrequested benefits, and what happens when mistakes are made. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with the one big rule that holds this whole idea together.
So let's get into our first section, the contract that isn't. Honestly, the best way to think about a quasi-contract is as the law's ultimate safety net for fairness. It's what steps in to make things right when there's no official deal between people.
Okay, this slide really gets to the heart of it. A regular contract, needs an offer, an acceptance, all that formal stuff. A quasi-contract? Nope, it has none of that. The people involved might not even know each other. Instead, a court steps in and says, look, this isn't fair, and creates an obligation. It's not an agreement, it's a legal fix.
And this whole idea is built on a really old legal principle from Latin, nemo debet loco plexuri ex aliena jactura. It's a fancy way of saying something super simple and profound. You shouldn't be allowed to get rich at someone else's expense. That's it. The point isn't to punish anyone, it's just to restore balance. Let's look at this comparison, because it makes the difference crystal clear. A real contract needs the essentials, right? Offer, acceptance. A quasi-contract doesn't. In a contract, the obligations are set by you and me. In a quasi-contract, they're imposed by the law. And the foundation? Well, a contract is built on agreement, but a quasi-contract is built on duty and this idea of equity or fairness. So, here's the bottom line. One is voluntary, the other is mandatory.
All right, enough theory. Let's see how this actually works in the real world. The law breaks quasi-contracts down into a few distinct types. And our first bucket is what we can call duties of aid. These are situations all about helping those who can't help themselves.
So the first type covers providing necessities to someone who legally can't make a contract. Think of a minor or someone who's mentally incapacitated. If you provide something essential to them, like food or shelter, the law says you deserve to be paid back. But, and this is a big but, there are strict rules. First, the person themselves isn't on the hook. You can't sue a kid for the groceries you bought them. Instead, you get reimbursed from their property or their estate. Second, what you gave them has to be a genuine necessary. We're talking food and clothing, not a new video game console. And finally, you only get back a reasonable price for what you provided.
Now, this next one's a little different. This happens when you step in to pay a debt that someone else was supposed to pay. But you're not just being nice. You have to do it to protect your own interests. If you do that, you have a right to get your money back from the person who should have paid in the first place. This example from the text makes it click. Let's say person A is renting land from person B, but B stops paying the property taxes. Now the government is about to sell the land, which means A is going to get kicked out. To stop that from happening, A pays B's overdue taxes. See, there's no contract between them for this, but the law says B has to repay A. Why? Because A wasn't just some random volunteer. They were protecting their own skin. Okay, on to our next major category. This is all about situations where you get a benefit you didn't exactly ask for, but it clearly wasn't meant to be a freebie. So the rule here is pretty simple. If someone does something for you and they clearly weren't intending to do it for free and you go ahead and enjoy the benefit of it, well, you're on the hook to pay for it. The key words there are not for free. It wasn't a gift and you knew it. This classic example just brings it to life. Imagine you're at a train station and a porter grabs your bags and starts carrying them. You don't say anything, you don't stop him, you just let him carry them all the way to your car. You can't turn around at the end and say, well, I never asked you to do that, and walk away. By accepting that service, you've enjoyed the benefit, and the law says you've got to pay a reasonable price. So what happens if you find a wallet on the street? Or someone's phone? Well, this fourth type of quasi-contract kicks in. The law basically says that when you find someone else's stuff, you suddenly have a specific set of responsibilities. You become a temporary caretaker, or what the law calls a bailee. And you have to strike this careful balance. On one hand, you have duties.
You've got to try to find the real owner, you have to take care of the item, and you definitely can't start using it yourself. But on the other hand, you also get rights. You can hold on to that item against anyone in the world, except for the true owner, and you're entitled to get paid back for any reasonable costs you had while trying to find them.
And this is not a new idea. Believe it or not, this principle was locked in way back in 1722. There was a case about a chimney sweep who found a jewel. He took it to a goldsmith who tried to steal it. The court ruled that the chimney sweep, as the finder, had a better right to that jewel than the goldsmith did. His right was second only to the person who had actually truly owned it in the first place. All right, we've arrived at our final category, which I like to think of as the law's undo button. This is all about the obligations that pop up when things just go wrong by mistake.
This one is probably the most straightforward of all. The rule says that if you get money or goods delivered to you by mistake, or even if you were forced to take them, you have to give them back. Simple as that. The law just doesn't let you profit from someone else's error.
And this brings us right back to where we started, our pizza problem. If a fruit basket gets delivered to your house by mistake and you eat all the fruit, you have to pay for it. You knew it wasn't a gift, you knew it was a mistake, but you chose to benefit from it anyway. So the pizza? Yeah, if you ate it knowing it wasn't yours, you were unjustly enriched. A quasi-contract was formed, and you owe them for that delicious mistaken pizza.
So, we've looked at 5 different situations: helping the helpless, paying someone else's debt, finding lost property, getting things by mistake. They all seem pretty different on the surface. But that brings us to our final section, the one powerful idea that connects every single one of them: the unjust enrichment rule.
And this, right here, is the absolute key takeaway. Every single quasi-contract, no matter the details, exists to enforce this one fundamental principle. It doesn't matter if it's a doctor helping an unconscious person on the side of the road or a bank accidentally putting $1 million in your account, the legal fix is the same. The law creates an obligation to pay or return the benefit, because no one should get a windfall at someone else's expense just because of an accident or mistake. It is the ultimate rule of fairness.
And that wraps up our explainer. The whole idea of a quasi-contract really shows that the law isn't just about rigid rules and signed pieces of paper. So much of it, at its heart, is just about equity. It kind of leaves us with a final thought, right? Beyond the law, where in your own life do you see this principle of fairness over formality playing out? Thanks for watching.